Hey, welcome to the weekly wave. Loneliness. It's a feeling we've all experienced at some point or another. But what happens when loneliness isn't just a phase, but kind of a way of life? When it becomes an epidemic? One that's hitting men today especially hard. Welcome to today's discussion on the male loneliness epidemic. It's a silent crisis that's growing in modern society. This isn't about just feeling alone for a weekend or a day or going through a rough patch. This is about the deep, persistent sense of isolation that's kind of affecting millions of men around the world. And the worst part, it's really not talked about enough. Today I'm going to dig deep into why it's happening, what factors are making it worse, and most importantly, what can be done about it. So, what is the male loneliness epidemic? We got to define what we mean when we say male loneliness. Loneliness isn't about just being physically alone. You can be in a crowded room and still feel isolated. You can have thousands of social media followers and still feel like no one truly knows you. For men, loneliness has a unique and dangerous edge. Studies have shown that men are more likely to suffer from social isolation as they age. In fact, a 2021 report from the Survey Center on American Life found that 15% of men say that they have no close friends at all. And that number has quadrupled since 1990. Why is this happening? Well, for one, there's a friendship recession. I know it sounds kind of weird to say, but as boys, friendships kind of came easily. You had school and sports and other shared activities that naturally created bonds. But as those boys become men and tend to get older, those friendships kind of fade. The careers take over, responsibilities grow, and really, before you know it, their once close friend group of friends has dissolved. Unlike women, who often maintain friendships through consistent communication and emotional openness, a lot of men tend to rely on proximity and shared experiences. Once those shared experiences like school or work disappear, and many struggle to keep their friendships alive. Society has long conditioned men to be self-reliant, sort of emotionally stoic and independent. The idea of the lone wolf is often glorified in media. Think of the strong, silent types like James Bond or John Wick. They're glorified nowadays. But in reality, isolation really isn't strength, it's suffering. That's why they tend to be so cold on the outside. Many men are taught from a young age to man up, stop whining, or deal with it. And as much as I can agree with these points on a certain extent, it kind of discourages the vulnerability factor. Now, I'm not saying men need to be vulnerable all the time, but there comes a point where it's okay to express a certain amount of emotion and still be considered a man. It shows that you truly care what's going on in your life, and it shows that you care for the person that you're sharing that vulnerability with. It develops more meaningful relationships. Another big aspect of this whole epidemic is the modern dating crisis. There's a lot of romantic isolation. Romantic relationships once served as kind of a safety net for loneliness, but in today's dating landscape, it's made things a hell of a lot more complicated. You have dating apps and unrealistic expectations and a lot of shifting gender dynamics, and it's made it hard for men to really form connections. A lot of young men report being single for longer periods than ever before, and it leads to deep feelings of rejection and self-doubt. Without the strong social support, romantic failures can feel devastating for a lot of men, and it exacerbates that isolation. The last root cause I want to bring up is the declining community and social spaces. Think about how people connected like, say, 30 to 40 years ago. There were these bowling leagues, neighborhood gatherings, church groups, and strong workplace camaraderie. And today, much of that has disappeared. Although they're still around, a lot of things work against it. Fewer people attend religious services. It's not as pushed as it once was. Many work remotely and don't even leave the house sometimes. And even when people go out, they're often glued to their phones rather than engaging with the people around them. So what's the result of all this? A society that's more connected digitally, but more isolated than ever in reality. With that comes consequences. Loneliness isn't just an emotional problem, it's a public health crisis. Studies have found that chronic loneliness can be as deadly as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It increases the risk of heart disease, depression, anxiety, and even an early death. And here's the kicker: men are less likely to seek help. Unlike women, who are more open to therapy and emotional support networks, men oftentimes suffer in silence to uphold the societal standard. This leads to higher rates of substance abuse, self-destructive behaviors, and ultimately, in fact, men account for about 75% of all deaths worldwide. That statistic alone should make you really stop and think. So, how can men combat this loneliness? How can we get over this epidemic? What can men do to fight back? There are solutions. They aren't always easy, but they are necessary. Men have to start prioritizing friendships in their life. We have to make an effort to reconnect with old friends. Just reach out, plan things. Don't wait for someone else to take the initiative. Whether it's just a weekly call or a shared hobby or a simple, hey, how you been? How long has it been? 15 years? These small acts compound over time. We also have to build new social circles. Join a men's group. Take a class, get involved in something that requires consistent interaction. Whether it's like a martial arts gym, a book club, or some sort of volunteering group, putting yourself in these places where friendships can organically develop is a crucial part. And I feel like this third point is kind of a society thing. We need to kind of redefine what masculinity is. Being a man doesn't really mean being emotionally numb to a certain extent. It doesn't mean handling everything alone. Yes, men are supposed to be the stronger partner. We should be able to take a punch and give a punch all the time and feel no vulnerability towards anyone and no sympathy. But that's the thing. True strength comes from a certain degree of vulnerability. Being open and expressing some emotions to the right people can have a real impact. It just depends on who you choose to be vulnerable with and choosing the right person or people. Listen, I'd like to think that I'm just as strong as another guy, and I'd like to think that I have all my bases covered all the time and that I'm good, I'm fine. But again, that's not always the case, and it's very easy to get caught up in what society thinks you should be, a tough guy. The male loneliness epidemic is a real thing, and it's getting a lot worse, but it doesn't have to define the future. As much as we hate to admit it, we need to face the facts. Men need a connection. They need some sort of support, whether that's emotionally or physically, and we need a community to be a part of. If you're struggling, just know you're not alone. There really are people who care and who want to hear from you, and ultimately who want to be there. But sometimes as a man, you have to take that first step. Confidence is strength. Let's kind of change the narrative. Let's build each other up, because at the end of the day, connection just isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. Thank you so much for listening.